The word lunatic, referring to a crazy man, comes from the Latin word luna or moon. Under a full moon, lunatics wander the earth. This is my true story of a lunatic on a full moon in October. October 31st, Halloween to be specific. Halloween used to be my favorite holiday. The spookier, the better. Until one Halloween, I stumbled upon something that would change my life forever. I was 17 and too old to go trick-or-treating, but I still wanted to walk the streets and see all the scary decorations. I painted my face as a clown and put on mismatched clothes to frighten kids when they saw me on the street. After dark, I slipped out of the house and wandered around. It was fun to see all the homes decorated with ghosts, goblins, and skeletons. In my neighborhood, it even had become a competition between neighbors who could decorate the spookiest house. Some were very elaborate, with fog machines and strobe lights of different colors. One guy dug a grave in his front yard and lay down inside a makeshift casket. As kids walked by, he would sit in his skeleton mask and scream, "Give me your candy!" The kids would scream and run to the next house. Parents were taking pictures of their kids with some chillingly original, creepy decorations. The homemade ones were the most impressive, with fake bodies and mad dogs chained to trees with recordings blaring of ferocious dogs. In my area, it is typical for the high school and a few civic organizations to do pop-up haunted houses as a charity event. As I walked, I came to a pop-up haunted house. Its front door was open with a few interior lights on. A few teenagers ran out of the house screaming in delight and fear. I asked them what the deal was. One of the kids said, "It's so realistic they went all out on setting the display. It's super gross. We left $10 at this event. It's really worth it. There was no tip jar. We just left it on the hall table. You gotta see this place." They laughed and ran down the street. The outside was barely decorated at all. They put no effort into it. Just a few carved jack-o'-lanterns and a hanging skeleton. That all changed as I walked into the entry. There was blood splattered on the wall that dripped down to the floor. It looked like it came from a slasher movie. It totally left me expecting Michael Mayer or someone evil inside. The kitchen was decorated as a gruesome crime scene. A severed arm lay on the counter, blood pooling and dripping onto the floor. On the breakfast table, an assortment of kitchen utensils covered in blood, still ripping into gooey flesh and festering with flies. They probably used corn syrup to attract them, and it made it horrifically real. They were buzzing around and landing on a headless torso tied to a chair in the corner. They must have used a bottle of stink to give the room a putrid smell. I had to hold my nose as I moved to the next room. The living room had a single lamp on a low setting tipped over on the floor, its lampshade illuminating the coffee table, where a doll sat grinning with a pile of fingers strewn at its feet. Arranged in a circle around it were bloody eyes. I gasped in horror. This was the best haunted house I'd ever seen. It indeed was frightening. The living room led to the staircase to the second floor, which I moved up cautiously, not knowing what to expect. I could hear music playing and crazy singing. It scared me in anticipation. As I approached a child's room, the singing turned to murmuring, making my spine tingle in fear. An old man sat on the floor with his back to the door. He was surrounded by children's toys and holding a bloody baby that he was cooing to in an eerie voice. I froze in the doorway as this was one of the most disturbing horror displays I've ever seen. The creepy old man sat swinging the baby and laughing hilariously. The baby looked so real and the blood dripped over the man. How did they do this? Whoever dreamed up this room was really a sick dude. The old man turned and looked at me through bloodshot eyes and blackened, crooked teeth. His mouth was stained with brown juice and blood dripped from the corners of his lips. I screamed and ran from the room, terrified but still laughing as I bounded down the stairs. I took my wallet out in the front hall and placed a 10 on the hall table with the other bills as a tip. As I left the house, police cars were screeching to a halt in front of the house, and officers were roping off the place with yellow crime scene tape. As the news developed, the old man was an inmate at the sanitarium for the mentally insane. He had escaped the institution when he was left to sit on a bench outside, unattended for his daily activity. He had lived in this house as a child and walked back to his childhood home. On finding a family living there, he flew into a rage and diced them up with the kitchen utensils, extracting their eyes and placing them in an arrangement in the living room before going to the baby's room and eating it alive. In high school, my friends and I were obsessed with horror movies, haunted houses, ghosts, and paranormal activity. The Halloween season was a great time for us. This year, Halloween was to fall on a full moon. Our idea was to find an abandoned house or a creepy forest and set up a secret rave for our freakish friends. About 40 other kids in the school loved raves as heavy metal mashers. They dwelled in the underworld of the supernatural. We spent the month of October searching out creepy places. While we were obsessed with the supernatural and the eerie, unexplained phenomenon, we weren't full believers either. We knew the difference between reality and fantasy. That gave us the confidence to explore vacant houses and abandoned buildings, to hang out in cemeteries in the dark, telling stories of chilling nightmares. It was all a part of the fun of scaring ourselves to death. A friend of my older brother told us about how he and his friends held raves when they were still in school. His home backed up to an old abandoned farm. It was initially owned by a darkly religious man. He believed in snake handling and held revivals where people spoke in strange, unknown languages only the devil knew. He said the farm was haunted by the spirits of the dead, buried in the graveyard next to the abandoned farmhouse. The old farmer's spirit was the most frightening of them all. After he was buried, no one wanted to buy the farm, which fell into disrepair. The fields grew with twisted brambling vines that made walking through impossible. It was an impenetrable barrier keeping curious people out and, more importantly, keeping the secrets there hidden. It was rumored that the farmer had murdered many travelers who knocked on his door, asking for a cup of water from his well or a slice of bread. Their bodies are hidden and never found in unmarked graves. My brother's friend said he had been there and knew a secret path that led through the thorns to the abandoned house. It would be a perfect place for a Halloween rave. The weekend before Halloween, he showed us the entrance to the path marked with a cross nailed upside down on an old Osage orange tree that created a natural fence between the suburban properties developed around the farm. He told us to pay close attention as we followed the trail, which twisted and followed an irregular route through the brambles. It was the only way in and the only way out. On Halloween, we packed a van with speakers, a turntable, and a portable generator for electricity. We tied markers along the trail so the others could follow their way to the house and barn. A crude map was given to where to park and how to find the Osage with the cross. They would have to sneak past one of the suburban neighbors through a manicured lawn to the entry, and they were instructed to be quiet and not to give notice of our trespass. The house and barn are the prototypical haunted house that you imagine. It was 2 floors with attic dormers with lots of points with gingerbread designs. There were 6 fireplace chimneys eerily leaning. The walls were covered in ivy and vines, making the house nearly invisible and impenetrable. A weather-vane cockeyed squeaked in the night breeze. The graveyard was between the house and the barn, the headstones leaning at awkward angles, a couple cracked and broken in pieces from where they once stood. The barn was the logical place for the rave. It had ample open space, and it was easy to drag an old hay rake towed behind a tractor on steel wheels when it was farm machinery. As the rave got underway, 50 people dressed in costumes showed up. This is a crowd who take Halloween seriously. The costumes were elaborate and horrifying. The attention to detail was apparent in knives and machetes, fake blood, and grotesque wounds. A tour was formed to explore the abandoned homestead, and a group of the more intrepid broke a window and created a passage into the house's darkness. Lit by flashlights, they wander rooms still filled with dusty furniture. Pictures hung on the walls of families past, and china dolls were still set in curio cabinets. The mystic of hauntings and ghosts was quickly dispelled, and more hideous costumed creatures paraded into the house lost in time. In the hall from the entry to the kitchen was a narrow door under the stairs leading to the second floor. It was bolted with a massive padlock. I kicked the door with my foot with all my force. After 3 of 4 attempts, the old wood gave way and the door swung open. A gust of malevolent air, putrid from decades of decay, swarmed the house as flies on a dead carcass. Everyone was screaming. Some fall to their knees, trying to breathe. A chaotic rampage of grotesquely costumed figures pushed and shoved to escape through the broken window. From the attic, flames appeared from nowhere. Smoke was thick and black, choking and life-depleting. The fire spread quickly, and everyone was lucky to get out, some dragged by others to the air of the night. A line of panicked ravers twisted through the narrow and bramble path, cutting wounds in the flesh and tearing costumes as they passed. What exactly we experienced, we could not explain. It was the most chilling nightmare imaginable, and we were lucky to have escaped the vengeful farmer who haunted the abandoned farm. My name is Bailey, and I live in Beckley, West Virginia. I went looking for something truly terrifying and found it. The whole month of October I call it spooky season, and it is my favorite time of year. I love Halloween even more than Christmas. October kicks off 31 days of spooky ghosts, goblins, and horror celebrations. Of course, the full moon in October is the most incredible night. Everyone knows that the full moon in October awakens unearthly magic, and demons walk the night. But last October's full moon was the most traumatic experience in my life. Here in the mountains of Appalachia, these haunts pop up like raves do in cities. They are unlicensed, unregulated haunted houses, and they are not advertised. You have to know someone who knows when and where one will pop up. Most are spooky, but one, as I found out, was downright dangerous. It was the first haunt that I had actually ever gone to. A friend suggested visiting a haunt, and of course, I was all over it with boundless enthusiasm. Charlotte has been my best friend since first grade. When we graduated high school, we became roommates. We do everything together. She had heard from a friend of hers at work about a planned haunt that would pop up, and on that night, we would be given clues as to where it was, and we would have to find it. Her coworker gave her an email address that we were to message and ask for a time and place. She said she had heard that last year. It was intense and eclipsed any haunted house run by high schools or even professional organizations. It was an event only for true gore hounds and people with strong horror tolerances. We messaged the email address and asked how to get a time slot for the demon's haunt. A reply came back instantly. Our names are burned under our heads as we ascend over the ocean. We take our commands from the winged beast. How many crowns adorn our heads? A riddle! Charlotte shouted. What the heck? It hit me immediately, and I said to Charlotte, send back 10. She typed 10 and hit send. An email shot back in minutes. You may enter. Charlotte was dumbstruck. How did you know the answer was 10? Charlotte, don't you remember when we were kids? That old preacher man came to church in the holler, and he thumped the Bible when he was reading from the book of Revelations? Why, yes, I do, Bailey! He shouted about the judgment day and that a great beast would rise out of the boiling waters, and he would be wearing 10 crowns upon its horns. Yes, that preacher man scared me to death. I have never forgotten. We thought we could get a time and place since we had solved the cryptic riddle, but instead we got another puzzle to solve. Go to where the Dutchman did his final dance. Paint a picture of welcome there. Charlotte, a crime show fanatic, knew this was about being hung by a noose when the legs of the victim spasmed. The Dutchman was an infamous serial killer imprisoned at the West Virginia Penitentiary and put to death there. The penitentiary is located in Moundsville on the Ohio River, a 3-hour drive from Beckley. They instructed us to go to Moundsville and take a picture of the Welcome to Moundsville sign. It is a 6-hour round trip. We decided to look online and find a picture of the Moundsville welcome sign and send that in the email. So that is what we did. It worked. We got an instant reply, midnight on October 21st, the night of the full moon. We would be sent a location the day before. On the 21st, with directions mapped, we drove the 40 minutes. It was an approximate location. We were instructed to go a hollow road until we saw a fire with green smoke. About 5 miles down the hollow, we saw the fire and the smoke. It had to be the demon's haunt. As instructed, we parked, took our flashlights, and found a footpath that led down a narrow gorge trail. At the bottom was an old, dilapidated house. We were looking for someone to pay for the haunt, but saw no one. I started to get nervous. The moon was bright, but we only had cheapo flashlights that did a poor job of illuminating the house. Just as we were about to turn around, a voice came. You girls must be lost to be in this hollow. Out of nowhere was a man straight out of the movie Deliverance who had Burt Reynolds squealing like a pig. Charlotte spoke up in a nervous voice. We are looking for the demon's haunt. Do you know where it is? Nah, never heard of it. He calls out, hey fellers, looky here what I found. 4 men materialized from the forest. Charlotte and I looked at each other knowing we had made a wrong decision. Don't you run or we'll catch you. If you hide, we'll find you. We are sorry to bother you. Please let us go and we will leave. I have a better idea. You girls lie flat and put your faces in the dirt. If you scream, I'll cut your tongue out with this here knife and cook it like bacon. We hadn't found the demon's haunt. We had found something far worse. For the next hour, those hillbillies subjected us to the most traumatic, incomprehensible torture you can imagine. We were stripped and tied to trees. They threatened us with things too horrible to retell. We begged forgiveness and promised never to tell anyone, but please let us go. They said, nah, you'll tell. We gotta bury ya. They dragged us by our hair and told us to dig our graves with our hands. I have never cried so hard in my life. I could see they were planning on killing us. Charlotte stood, raised her head defiantly and said, I will not dig my own grave. If you intend to kill me and dig it yourself. She gave me the courage to stand with my tear-streaked face, saying, the same goes for me. Congratulations, girls, you have survived, said the hillbilly now with no accent. You have passed the demon's haunt. On the car drive home, we recounted our fears and emotions. It became clear to us that nothing had happened to us but threats. Nothing serious or harmful physically besides a few slaps and some hair pulling. They stripped us of our coats and sweaters, but we were always in our undergarments. The event was a psychological game that scared us beyond our mortal life. We had gone looking for something terrifying and found it in being mentally tortured. They didn't come after us. We went looking for them.
Subscribe.